My name is Patricia. As a nurse, I work 4 days a week at the general hospital in this town. I've been married to my current husband David for 5 years now. He works as an administrator at a local school and always seems busy. Our family consists of 3 people, me, David, and my daughter Emma. Emma is 10 years old, my child from my previous marriage, but I thought David and Emma had a good relationship. On weekends, David would play video games with Emma or help her with homework. Emma seemed to enjoy that time together. Our life was peaceful. In the mornings, I'd make breakfast and David would take Emma to school. I'd work my shift at the hospital and come home in the evening to prepare dinner. David often worked late into the night, but on weekends we made sure to spend time together as a family. On the surface, we were a happy family. Recently, I'd noticed Emma seemed a little different. When she came home from school, she'd go straight to her room. She used to be such a chatty child, but now when I asked about school, she'd only answer, "Fine." She was quiet during dinner and didn't seem to have much appetite. I was busy with work and didn't have the bandwidth to observe Emma's behavior closely. When I asked David, "How's Emma doing lately?" he'd just say, "I think she's okay." We play games together sometimes. One day while folding laundry, I noticed a blue bruise on Emma's arm. When I asked her about it, she said, "I just fell at school." I told her, "Be more careful," and didn't pursue it further. Even though I had nursing knowledge, when it came to my own daughter, I somehow became optimistic. David must have seen Emma's injury too, but he didn't say anything. Perhaps there was an unspoken distance in our family. Looking back now, that was the first sign. Then 2 weeks ago, Emma developed a high fever. Her temperature rose above 39 degrees Celsius, and she complained of pain all over her body. I gave her fever medicine and monitored her, but the fever wouldn't come down. 3 days later, when I took her to the pediatrician, the doctor said with a serious expression, "I think we should do more detailed tests." As a precaution, I recommend a hospital admission for examination. David immediately made an appointment at the hospital. I thought, it's probably just the flu, but the doctor's expression concerned me. Once the date for the examination admission was set, we began preparing. The morning of the hospital admission was like any other morning. Emma woke up at 7 and changed into her uniform. I prepared oatmeal and fruit for breakfast. David drank coffee while reading the newspaper. Emma ate her breakfast silently. I said, "Do your best with the tests today." Emma nodded slightly. David said gently, "If you need anything, just say so right away." Emma answered, "I'm okay." I'd heard those words so many times. "I'm okay." Emma always said that. After breakfast, David sent Emma off to school. Emma was supposed to go to school as usual and then head to the hospital in the afternoon. I had a morning shift that day, so I could only go to the hospital in the afternoon. It was ironic that I, working as a nurse, couldn't accompany my own daughter to her examination admission. When I told David, "Call me when I get to the hospital in the afternoon," he replied, "Got it. Don't worry. I'll be with her." At 2 in the afternoon, David picked up Emma from school and took her to the hospital. While working on the ward, I checked my cell phone repeatedly. Just after 3, a message arrived from David, "We've arrived at the hospital." Getting an explanation of the tests. I felt relieved. My shift ended at 4, and I hurried to the pediatric ward. When I reached Emma's room, David was sitting in a chair looking at his smartphone. Emma was lying in bed. "Emma, are you okay?" I asked. Emma answered, "Yeah." David explained. They did blood tests and X-rays. Tomorrow morning, they'll do more detailed tests. She's staying overnight for observation. I put my hand on Emma's forehead. She still had a slight fever. The pediatrician came into the room and said gently to Emma, "We're going to run various tests, but you don't need to worry. The doctor told us, you don't need to stay at the hospital tonight. We'll call if anything comes up." David and I told Emma, "We'll come back tomorrow," and left the hospital. On the way home, David drove in silence. I said, "It'll be okay. It's probably just the flu." David didn't respond. He was quieter than usual, but I thought he was just worried. When we got home, I made a simple dinner, pasta and salad. David didn't seem to have much appetite and barely ate. "Are you tired?" I asked. "Yeah, a little," he answered. After dinner, we watched TV in the living room. A news program was on, but I barely absorbed any of it. David sat on the sofa looking at his smartphone. I kept murmuring, "I wonder if Emma's okay." David said, "The nurses are watching her, so she'll be fine." His voice was calm but somehow distant. After 10 o'clock, we went to the bedroom. I lay down in bed but couldn't fall asleep. I was worried about Emma. David seemed to fall asleep right away. I could hear his breathing. I stared at the ceiling, remembering when Emma was little. When Emma was born, my ex-husband didn't show much interest. After the divorce, I raised Emma alone. When I met David, he accepted Emma as if she were his own daughter. That made me so happy. David was a good father. A stepfather, but like a real father. At 2 in the morning, my cell phone rang. I bolted upright. It was an unknown number. My heart pounded violently. With trembling hands, I answered the phone. "Hello?" It was a woman's voice. "Is this Patricia? This is Central Hospital. Can you come right away?" My mind went blank. What happened to Emma? I shouted. The nurse said in a calm voice, "Ma'am, please come as quickly as you can. And this is important, please don't tell your husband." The moment I heard those words, my world stopped. Don't tell your husband. Why? Why did I have to keep this from David? I asked, "What do you mean? Why keep it from my husband?" The nurse said, "We'll explain at the hospital. Please, come alone." The call ended. I stood frozen in the darkness. David was still sleeping. I could hear his breathing. With trembling hands, I got dressed. I put on jeans and a sweater and grabbed my keys. I left the bedroom quietly so as not to wake David. I got in the car and started the engine. The residential neighborhood was quiet in the middle of the night. I got on the highway. My mind was in turmoil. What happened to Emma? Why did I have to keep it from David? The nurse's voice repeated in my head, "Don't tell your husband." I was afraid to think about what those words meant. I drove fast and reached the hospital in 15 minutes. I parked in the lot and ran toward the entrance. The night entrance was dimly lit. When the automatic doors opened, a nurse was waiting. It was the nurse who had called me. "Ma'am, this way," she said. Her expression was serious. I asked repeatedly, "What happened? Is Emma okay?" The nurse only answered, "The doctor will explain." We got in the elevator and headed to the pediatric floor. The elevator doors opened. At that moment, I gasped. Police officers were standing in the hallway. 2 uniformed officers had cordoned off part of the hallway with yellow tape. My feet stopped. Why were the police here? Police at Emma's room. My mind refused to understand. The nurse gently took my arm. "This way." I was led down the hallway. One of the officers looked at me. His eyes held sympathy. I didn't know what that meant. The sound of my own footsteps in the hallway seemed abnormally loud. The surrounding sounds were fading away. The nurse's voice, the sound of the police radio, everything sounded like I was underwater. We stopped in front of the pediatric doctor's office. The nurse knocked on the door. "Come in," came a voice from inside. The door opened. Inside was the pediatrician, the doctor who had examined Emma. His expression was more serious than I'd ever seen. "Patricia, please sit down," the doctor said. I shook my head. I couldn't sit. My body was rigid. "Where's Emma? What happened to Emma?" My voice was shaking. The doctor took a deep breath. I could see his hands trembling slightly. The doctor was trembling. That alone told me something terrible had happened. "Patricia, Emma is safe now. Her life is not in danger." The doctor's first words gave me some relief. But his expression didn't change. "However, we've discovered a very serious situation." The doctor continued. "When we examined Emma's body in detail, we found multiple injuries and bruises." I nodded. "Yes, she said she fell at school." The doctor shook his head. "No, Patricia. These injuries weren't caused by falling." The doctor's voice became even lower. "These are from repeated physical trauma. Contusions, compression injuries, old wounds mixed with new ones. Medically speaking, this is not an accident." My heart almost stopped. "What do you mean?" The doctor looked me straight in the eye. "Patricia, we have to ask. Is someone hurting Emma? Is Emma living in a safe environment?" It took me a few seconds to understand what that question meant. And when I understood, my world collapsed. They suspected David. My husband, Emma's stepfather David, was suspected of abusing Emma. That's why they said on the phone, "Don't tell your husband." They thought David was the perpetrator. "No!" I shouted. "David would never do something like that. Absolutely not." My voice echoed through the hallway. The doctor said calmly, "Patricia, we're just trying to confirm the facts. Statistically, most child abuse occurs within the home. Especially in stepfather-stepchild relationships." "No!" I shouted again. "David loves Emma. He's a kind father." The doctor was about to say something, but then there was a knock on the door. A nurse came in. Emma woke up. She says she wants to see her mother. I looked at the doctor. "Let me see Emma." The doctor nodded. "Of course. But first, just one thing. Patricia, we need to talk to Emma. We need to hear from Emma herself what happened. And by law, we must report this matter to Child Protective Services and the police." My legs shook. Child Protective Services. Police. Was this real? Just hours ago, we were a normal family. David was sleeping. Emma was getting tests at the hospital. And now, police were involved in a suspected abuse case. Led by the nurse, I headed to Emma's room. As I walked down the hallway, my mind was in chaos. David couldn't have hurt Emma. Absolutely not. But the doctor's words wouldn't leave my head, repeated physical trauma. I opened the door to the room. Emma was sitting up in bed. The moment she saw me, Emma burst into tears. "Mom!" I rushed to Emma. As I tried to hug her, I truly saw for the first time what was happening to my daughter's body. Emma's arms had multiple blue bruises. Old ones and new ones. Big ones and small ones. Emma's legs had similar bruises. I hadn't noticed until now how many injuries there were on Emma's body in her hospital gown. Emma, this is. My voice trembled. What happened? Emma kept crying. The doctor and nurse came into the room. A police officer came with them. The doctor said gently to Emma, Emma, can you tell your mom why you have so many injuries? Emma looked at me. There was fear in Emma's eyes. What was she afraid of? Was she afraid to tell the truth? Mom, I'm sorry, Emma said. What are you apologizing for? Emma, you didn't do anything wrong, I said. Emma took a deep breath. Then in a trembling voice, she began to speak. At school. My heart stopped. At school. What happened at school? Emma continued through her tears. Some kids have been bullying me. 4 months now. My world shook again. Bullying at school. Not David. At school. What kind of bullying? I asked. Emma answered. At first it was just name-calling. But it gradually got worse. They'd push me in the hallway, kick me during PE. I've even been hit in the bathroom. I couldn't breathe. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything? Emma answered through tears. I did tell someone, Mom. I told Dad. The moment I heard those words, something inside me shattered. David? Emma nodded. Yeah. About a month ago. Dad said he'd report it to the school. But I didn't want him to. I thought it would get worse. So I begged Dad. I asked him not to tell you. I stood there stunned. David knew. He'd known for a month. And he hadn't said anything to me. Why? The doctor began to explain. Patricia, your husband explained the situation to us yesterday when he brought Emma to the hospital. He was concerned that Emma was being bullied at school, that the injuries were increasing. He wanted to document the injuries. As evidence. The nurse continued. Your husband was trying to protect Emma. He repeatedly tried to persuade Emma to report it to the school. But Emma refused. So your husband decided to document the injuries as medical records. I sank into a chair. David wasn't the bad guy. He was trying to protect his daughter. And I had suspected him. The police officer spoke up. Patricia, we're now going to investigate the bullying at school. Emma is a victim of assault. We'll speak to the perpetrator students and their parents. I held my head in my hands. Why didn't I notice? Why couldn't Emma tell me? Why didn't David tell me? The doctor said quietly, your husband wanted to respect Emma's wishes. He was trying to wait until Emma was ready to speak for herself. But seeing the injuries increase, he must have decided he couldn't wait any longer. I looked at Emma. Emma was huddled up small. I hugged my daughter. I'm sorry, Emma. For not noticing. Mom was too busy to really look at you. Emma cried in my arms. It's not your fault, Mom. Dad tried to help. I was just scared. Hearing those words, I understood for the first time how much David loved Emma. Blood relationship didn't matter. He was a true father. I couldn't move for several minutes, holding Emma. My daughter's small body trembled in my arms. The doctor and nurse quietly left the room. The police officer followed. We were alone. Only Emma's crying echoed in the hospital room. As I stroked my daughter's hair, I painfully realized how much I hadn't seen. As a nurse, I was trained every day to notice small changes in patients' bodies. But I couldn't notice my own daughter's suffering. Emma, I said quietly. Tell me more. What happened at school? Emma raised her face from my arms. Her eyes were red and swollen. At first, the girls in class started saying mean things about me. That my clothes were lame, that my hair looked weird. I tried not to care. Emma continued. But it gradually escalated. When we'd pass in the hallway, they'd bump into me on purpose. They'd put nasty notes in my locker, hide my textbooks. As I listened to my daughter's story, I felt my chest tighten. So when did it become violent? Emma answered in a small voice. About 2 months ago. After PE class, 3 girls cornered me in the locker room. At first they just pushed me. But when I fell to the floor, one of them kicked me. I gasped. And after that? Emma continued, trembling. It happened many times after that. In the bathroom, on the stairs, in the schoolyard. Always in places where no one could see. Why didn't you tell a teacher? I asked. Emma shook her head. I thought it would be useless. The teachers pretend not to notice. And the girls said if I told, it would get worse. My heart filled with anger and sadness. My daughter had lived in fear at school every day. And I, caught up in work, hadn't noticed anything. When did you tell David? I asked. Emma answered, seeming a bit calmer. About a month ago. One day, Dad noticed a bruise on my arm and kept asking about it. At first I lied, but Dad didn't believe me. So I told him everything. A little light returned to Emma's eyes. Dad wasn't angry. He was just really worried. He said we should report it to the school right away, but I said no. I thought it would get worse. I was struck by complex emotions. David had known for a whole month. And respecting Emma's wishes, he hadn't told me. Was that right? But if Emma had asked him not to tell. Dad asked me every day if I was okay, Emma continued. At night, before bed, he'd come to my room and listen. I asked him to keep it secret from you. Because you're tired from work, and I didn't want to worry you. Tears wouldn't stop flowing. My daughter was trying to protect me. And so was David. But Dad kept saying we couldn't go on like this. That the injuries were increasing. That we had to document them. Emma looked at me. That's why Dad brought me to the hospital. He thought if he said it was for examination tests, you'd accept it. I stood up. I looked out the window. Dawn was approaching. The sky was gradually getting lighter. I understood how foolish I'd been. David was trying to document the injuries as medical records to protect his daughter. As evidence. For when he reported to the school or police. He was acting strategically. And I knew nothing. There was a knock on the door. The doctor came in. Patricia, may I speak with you for a moment? I nodded. The doctor sat in a chair and showed me some papers. This is an explanation your husband wrote yesterday during the examination admission. I took the papers. In David's neat handwriting, Emma's situation was written in detail. Emma has been experiencing ongoing bullying at school for the past 2 months, including physical violence. She refuses to report it to the school, but the injuries are increasing. I want to document this in medical records and take legal action at the appropriate time. David's words were clear. He wasn't being emotional. He was calmly thinking about how to protect his daughter. The doctor said, your husband was prioritizing Emma's safety while respecting her wishes. We initially suspected abuse based on statistical probability. But after your husband's explanation, Emma's testimony, and his records, we understood the situation. The doctor continued. In fact, your husband responded in an exemplary manner. Rather than ignoring the child's wishes and forcing action, he was preparing to ensure her safety. I sank into a chair. David was a perfect father. Even without a blood connection. No, perhaps because there was no blood connection, he acted more carefully, more thoughtfully. As a stepfather, he valued his relationship with Emma, so as not to betray Emma's trust. But at the same time, he was taking action to protect Emma. I searched for words. I didn't see anything. While my daughter was suffering every day. While my husband was trying so hard. The doctor said kindly, "Patricia, don't blame yourself. Many parents wouldn't notice in the same situation. Especially when the child is trying to hide it." But I couldn't forgive myself. The nurse came into the room. "Patricia, the police officers would like to speak with you." I looked at Emma. Emma said, "Go, Mom. I'm okay." I went into the hallway. 2 police officers were waiting. One began explaining. "Patricia, we're going to contact the school now. We'll speak with the students Emma named and their parents. This will be treated as an assault case. Will the school do anything?" I asked. The officer nodded. Schools have an obligation to prevent bullying. This case clearly involves assault, so the perpetrator's students will face severe consequences. In the worst case, there could be transfers or juvenile court proceedings. I felt relieved. Finally, Emma would be protected. "We also need to speak with your husband," the officer continued. "His testimony is important. When he found out, how he responded, we'll document everything." I nodded. "May I call my husband?" The officer answered, "Of course. In fact, we'd like him to come." I took out my cell phone. I called David. After 3 rings, a sleepy voice answered. "Patricia. What time is it?" I took a deep breath. "David, come to the hospital. Right away." David's voice changed completely. "Did something happen to Emma?" I said, "Emma's okay. But I want you to come. There's a lot to talk about." 30 minutes later, David arrived at the hospital. He seemed to have run from the parking lot and was out of breath. When he saw me, he rushed over. "Where's Emma? What happened?" I looked into his eyes. And for the first time, I said, "Thank you." David looked confused. "For what?" "For protecting Emma. When I didn't notice, you noticed all along." "Thank you." David's eyes grew moist. He hugged me. "Emma is my daughter. Even without a blood connection, she's my daughter. Protecting her is natural." We embraced in the hallway. There were doctors and nurses around, but we didn't care. The police investigation was swift. The 3 students Emma named were immediately questioned. Though they initially denied it, faced with medical records and multiple witness testimonies, they admitted to the violence. The students' parents were called to the school and forced to apologize. However, it was clear the apology was merely formal. There was no genuine remorse in their eyes. The school urgently convened an anti-bullying committee, and the perpetrator students were given suspension. David said, "This isn't the end. I'll keep watch until Emma can return to school safely." A week later, we had a discussion in the living room at home. Emma had been discharged from the hospital and was recovering at home. The physical injuries were healing, but the emotional wounds remained. David sat on the sofa next to Emma. I sat across from them. "Emma," David said gently, "I've been thinking all along about how to protect you." Emma looked at David. "Why didn't you tell Mom?" I asked. David took a deep breath. "Because Emma asked me not to." She didn't want to worry you. You're always tired from work. Emma knew that. David continued. But I wasn't doing nothing. I talked with Emma every night. I documented the situation. And I made a plan to create medical records. I intended to take action eventually. Tears welled up in my eyes. I'm sorry. I should have noticed. Emma stood up and sat next to me. It's not your fault, Mom. I was hiding it. But Dad asked me, "Are you okay?" every day. Because Dad was there, I could endure it. Emma looked at David. Thank you, Dad. David's eyes grew moist. Emma, you're my daughter. I'll always protect you. That's what family does. After that, Emma began receiving support from the school counselor. She went to counseling twice a week. The psychological trauma didn't disappear easily, but gradually signs of recovery appeared. The school introduced an anti-bullying program and held a school-wide assembly to discuss bullying. David, as a school administrator, became a driving force for this program. He came to be recognized as a trustworthy adult for other students as well. 3 months later, Emma decided to return to school. I was anxious, but Emma said, "It's okay. I'm not scared anymore. Because I have Dad and Mom." David took Emma to school every day. And he always picked her up after school. During that first week, I thought about Emma many times while at work. But Emma came home cheerful every day. Gradually, Emma's smile returned. One evening, the three of us were eating dinner together. David had made pasta. Emma had an appetite for the first time in a while. In the middle of the meal, Emma said quietly, "Dad, thank you." David looked surprised. For what? Emma smiled. For protecting me. For believing in me. David answered gently, "Always, Emma. That's what family does." Watching that scene, tears overflowed from my eyes. They weren't tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. For a long time, I thought family meant blood ties. But I was wrong. Family meant people who protect each other, trust each other, and sometimes even respect each other's silence. David was a stepfather, but he was the true father. What he did for Emma, that's something even a biological father might not be able to do. I looked at the two of them. David was laughing while talking with Emma. Emma was laughing too. Over these 3 months, we'd become a real family. Through overcoming trials. Even while getting hurt. And now we were bound more strongly than before. I smiled quietly. This was family. A family connected not by blood, but by heart. That's what we were.